July 8th meeting of the Missoula Parking Commission to order and begin with introductions and roll call. I'm Joe Easton, Chair of the Missoula Parking Commission. Mike.
Mike Steinberg, Board Member.
Peter Walker Kelleher, Board Member.
Tiffany Brander, Board Member.
Jody Pilgrim, Director.
Thank you. We have 4 of our 5 commission members present. We may get our 5th, but we have a quorum. Moving on to approval of minutes. Need a motion and discussion and any changes to the minutes of our board meeting on June 3rd.
I would move to approve our minutes from the June 3rd board meeting.
Thank you. One of the two of you.
I second.
Motion has been seconded. All those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Commission, any adjustments to the agenda?
No, sir.
Do we have any public comment on any items not on the agenda today? Jody, any communications or presentations?
No,
Financial statement?
no financial statement this month.
Would you like to go over your director's report, please?
Yes. All right, you all received the director's report as part of our board package. Our top item is Bank Street, and we will be talking a lot about Bank Street during our action items. So I just want to skim through these pictures really quickly. This was the first week of construction where they started chipping out some of the concrete on the top level of the structure, fenced everything off, put up some really great signage so that people know they can't park there or access it as pedestrians. And then this is, I wanted to show you all this beautiful picture of our initial problem. When we first discovered the issue in Bank Street, it was because light was showing through in this area on the northwest corner of the garage. And this is going to be the, I think, most complicated repair, but Jackson can speak to that. So Tyler from Jackson is here if anyone wants to talk about the construction efforts and how they're going. But today for Bank Street, we will primarily be focusing on the financing piece. We've received our final GMP for bid package 2 from Jackson Construction, and which will bring our final GMP for the full project to $3,210,774. This GMP came in under our approved budget for fiscal year 26, which was $3.49 million. So we are well under budget. We also have Steve from Baker Tilly here to talk about funding a reserve account for our bonds and approval of a term sheet for the financing solicitation. And we have Courtney Ellis here from Dorsey Whitney to answer any of the legal questions about that financing for this repair. I will continue to put this schedule in the director's report through August when we have our final approvals for Bank Street. I briefly wanted to touch on jurisdictional expansion. During the month of June, MPC hosted 3 in-person engagement events for the hip strip, and we also had an active engage page which had a map set up on it where people could click and comment on how they use the hip strip and what their thoughts are on parking management in the area. I did include a full listing of all of the comments we received on our engage page, as well as some emails that we received throughout that engagement, and I would like everyone on the board to take time to review those before our August meeting, so they're familiar with what people are saying about our potential expansion. During the month of July, we will be going to City Council with an informational item in their committee to talk about expansion and what we've found through our engagement efforts. Then I will come back to the board on August 12th and ask for board to approve the expansion of our jurisdiction map that we can take to council for approval. Our staffing update here, we are in the process of reviewing our parking enforcement officer applicants. Our previous recruitment for our fourth parking enforcement officer failed, and so we had to start a new one. We also interviewed for the admin specialist 3 position on June 26th, and they will be starting on Monday, July 28th. I'm sure you have all read this staffing update. We anticipate being fully staffed August 2025. Our maintenance update from our maintenance supervisor, Brandon, who is on the call if you guys have any questions about it. We were having some issues. As you all remember, we had a pilot program to add hourly parking down into the Karis lot, which has traditionally been just a lease-only parking lot. And we did that through a virtual pay only option to add in that hourly. So there's a big sign at the entrance of the Karis lot that says pay through Passport. But people were getting confused because there's a meter that they can see from the entrance of the lot. And so they would go over and pay at the meter, and that payment wasn't valid in the lot, and they were getting tickets and they were getting angry. So we ordered some new signage, meter payments not valid in Karis lot, and put them on all of the meters down in New Park. And that happened last week, so we will see if that helps the situation at all. We also purchased a new height restrictor sign. We used to have one hung on the inside of the garage. Putting it on the outside of the garage, we are hoping will help people stop running their roof racks into the top of our garage, because their cars are short enough to fit in, but sometimes you go out of town for the weekend and forget that you have all of your camping gear still up there on top, and it does damage to those things and to our garage. So we're hoping this signage will help people with that. And then landscaping is a big project at the beginning of every summer, making sure all of our grass doesn't die, and weeding. And we're still working through upgrading all of our pay stations to pay station 8. We've had some stumbling blocks along the way with that upgrade. But we do expect that when it is successfully completed, we'll be able to push all of our upgrades out virtually instead of having our maintenance team go to each individual meter to do upgrades. So that's it for the director's report. Does anyone have any questions?
Any questions or comments? Okay, thanks. We'll go on to our first action item, as we said, package number 2 for the GMP approval. Jody, will you introduce this item, please?
Sure thing. Tyler, are you going to want me to pull up the executive summary, or what would you like me to share? Okay. So I'm going to pull up the executive summary here for you all first. And in our last meeting, we approved bid package number 1. So bid package number 2 is primarily the mechanical work, all of the lighting, plumbing, and then the traffic coating membrane. Nope, that was expansion joints. Traffic coating on the stairs. Thank you. And so we have Tyler from Jackson here to talk through this GMP.
Again, my name's Tyler Kirk with Jackson. So just to run through very quickly, as Jody mentioned, bid package number 2 came in, bid that out last week, and we're able to get a draft turned around for this GMP amendment number 2. So we did come in over budget at 3.2 million, roughly. So that leaves, and that includes a couple of alternates that we're able to accept. So let's see. Right now, as far as current progress through Bank Street, we're holding our schedule. So everything is looking good on that end. Schedule is basically the same thing for this GMP amendment, so not anticipating any changes there. And then just one of the first things we'll be working on here is getting the electrical gear and light fixture lead times. That may be our only kind of procurement concern. but we're getting that dialed in. You want me to jump into like level of detail on like allowances and stuff, or do you want me to stay higher level? There we go. Yep, thank you. Okay, so yes, for allowances, so that T-biscuit repair allowance, we had 130,000 set aside for that to essentially replace the other half of the shear connections on the deck. As I mentioned last month, we were able to find that we can hold those shear connections, and then so we don't need that allowance. So basically, I'm deducting out the 130,000 that we held in the first GMP. I'm deducting that out, so we're not forecasting to need that, which is good. Let's see. So yeah, that is credited back in this GMP amendment. And then we've got just a couple more allowances. So we've got moisture mitigation epoxy primer allowance, and that just basically if we can't get the moisture content on our pourbacks, this is basically the application that we can use to essentially coat that so that they can proceed on with traffic bearing membrane. Higgins planter landscape and irrigation repair. So don't really know what's down there for irrigation right now. So this is basically, once we get into those, we'll get those repaired. And then reinstalling and replacing bird protection and cant strips in the lower level area. So basically getting bird wire back on mains and getting those kind of cant strips up on the landing areas, keep the birds out. So that is what we have for allowances. And then other than that, as Jody mentioned, very high level. This basically, a package contains masonry scope. So this is a lot of repairs where we need to, or patch back where we're adding columns and need to do repairs around added corbels and things like that. We've got handrails, guardrails, got the metal roof for the canopy, including gutter and downspout and snow guard, expansion joint, doors, hardware, and then painting, fire protection, plumbing, and electrical, including lighting and fire alarm. So, and as Jody mentioned, basically we've got budget came in total about 3.2 million, with this package being worth 956,000 approximately.
Questions about bid pack number 2? So, we'll go ahead.
Thanks for being with us, Tyler. What level of review has occurred, either maybe from city engineering or from DCI, or as it relates to all of this information that's presented?
Yeah, so we had a pretty quick turnaround on this. So basically the plan was, from bid package number 1 setup is to basically have this budget set up. Everybody reviewed it, agreed upon it. And then essentially last week, as soon as we got bids, we were tracking that. So that basically went right over to Jody the next day. We finished this up, which matches pretty much what our previous scope descriptions had. And then yeah, we reviewed it with her Wednesday, last week. Made a few revisions and then sent it back over for final.
Couple of mechanic questions. I do see where the allowance for the T-biscuit is a credit to the project, not credited towards contingency, which is good. Have you had any, or do you expect any calls on contingency going forward?
We've got a couple small ones. One I couldn't price out to get into this amendment in time is just a structural fix at the top of, kind of in that picture where you saw us demoing, basically repairing some really rusty connections. But I mean, right now with where contingency is and everything, I think it would probably be maybe that one RFI right now. And, you know, potentially $2,000 to the steel package for some changes that I'm trying to work through with them. Other than that, right now, I don't have anything else on here. I tried to make sure everything was covered from prior bid pack to this one where you may have some potential scope gap. So we made sure to cover all the changes from bid pack 1 to bid pack 2. And I feel really pretty good about our number. So I think our contingency, you know, is more than usual for like a new build.
Yeah.
But so I feel really good on where we're at on contingency.
So Jody, one thing to keep in your back pocket going forward is a change order to reduce the percentage of contingency. And just take it out of the ability of either side or design to spend that money. In the note about potential risks, one recommendation, as you get more information about the light fixtures, I personally would rather sacrifice the exact spec and the condition of those light fixtures for accurate date. So between the engineers and yourself and Jackson, find an alternative or a substitution for the light fixtures that can be delivered within the schedule and not put that schedule risk in place.
Agreed.
Any other questions or comments? Tiffany, anything?
No, sir, but I am happy to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I would like to move to approve the GMP amendment for bid package number 2 in the amount of 956,455.46.
Would you say the dollar amount again? Kind of rambled out.
Yes, I thought it would be easier if I just said the numbers instead of saying it all out. $956,455.46.
Thank you. The motion is in order. We need a second.
I second.
And a second from Mike. Any other further discussion on the motion and the bid package? Any comment from members of the public in the room or online?
There is nobody.
There we go.
There's nobody online to comment.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call the question. Will you provide a roll call vote, please?
Mike Steinberg, what is your vote?
Approve?
Peter Walker Keller, what is your vote?
Approve.
Tiffany Brander, what is your vote?
Approve?
Joe Easton, what is your vote?
Approve.
The motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Tyler. Jody, Steve, should we discuss 9.3 before we have a motion to fund a reserve account so that we understand what we're being asked?
I'm happy to change that order. Steve, is that comfortable for you?
Does that make sense or whatever?
It'll make the slideshow a little funky, but I think Steve can manage.
Okay,
Okay.
come on up, Steve.
Yep.
Yeah. So go ahead, Jody or Steve.
Yeah, do you mind sharing the slides that I sent? And then we'll just start from I believe that it's the black slide kind of halfway through. Well, good afternoon, Board Chair, members of the board. Steve Sharp again from Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors. We were here, gosh, about a month ago, maybe a little more than that, to talk about the financing for Bank Street. So what you have in front of you that we're pulling up is sort of the procedural next steps once we've received the construction side of things from a cost perspective. Now we know what we're going to be looking for from a financing perspective. So securing a lender is sort of part and parcel with that. So how we look to sort of bring that lender on board is through a solicitation, competitively through a term sheet process. And we're getting there. I don't want to get too far ahead of my slides. There we go. It's about halfway through. It's the charcoal colored slides. And we'll just start from the top on the next slide. Perfect. Thank you. You can go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. So as I was mentioning, first, the recommendation is to proceed with a bank or a lender solicitation for the financing, just given the size and the characteristic of the financing. Other alternative methods, while we have explored those, are not necessarily advisable or sort of the first approach in terms of how we would secure the funding for the Bank Street project. And there's some characteristics I'm happy to discuss with that. But with that said, procedurally, what we would be looking to do is to provide that document that I believe you all have received with the documents along with the other items for this packet item. We would solicit that or send that term sheet out to lenders and secure offers based on the terms prescribed in that term sheet. Really, the goal here is to create both competition and uniformity and fairness in the process. That's really what we drive for, is have folks kind of working against each other to get the best terms and conditions for the parking commission, but also do it in a way that is sort of across the board fair to those that are putting a proposal in. We don't want to get out ahead of ourselves and provide somebody an opportunity to give us a bid first, or we certainly don't want to give a last look at the offering either. So we like to have it structured in that way. I think it provides a lot of clarity in terms of what we're looking for by providing a term sheet. And it's an element of a foundational aspect of where we're sitting from a terms and conditions perspective. So that's why we would look to take that approach in this financing to provide and secure a lender for this project. There's some other merits on this slide, but I think it sort of wraps a bow on why this makes sense. Go to the next slide. So what's in the term sheet? I'm not going to go through every one of these items, but I'll give you the highlights here. It talks about the project. It talks about what we're asking for dollar amount wise. Talks about how the bonds are going to get repaid and certain security provisions that go along with that. For example, we're going to be talking about a reserve account after this. So it describes that element of the financing. So the objectives we want to get across to those lenders that we're looking to get on board: who's borrowing the money, how's it getting repaid, what's the money going towards, and what are some other provisions that are in place that either the commission's going to do or not going to do as part of the financing. For example, we're not going to secure or receive a rating as part of this financing. It would be a bank or a direct purchase by a bank. So a credit rating, a formal credit rating, is not something that we would typically do for that. So that's one item that we're telling them out of the gate. Hey, we're not doing this. So if you're going to ask for it, we're saying we're not doing it. It's a cost item. The commission maintains a rating currently. It's something we can point to say is out there. But the expectation is those banks are doing their own credit diligence.
Our rating right now? What is our rating right now?
A+.
A+.
Yep.
And so isn't there a relationship between that rating, and even though bank or an institution isn't going to rely on that rating in their range, they are going to offer a price based in relation to it somehow. So
Yeah, it's a great question. So it does fundamentally speak to the credit quality of the commission and the source of repayment, right? So the characteristics that are driving the risk side of how a lender would look at this offering. It's the same approach as a rating agency would. So it's something they look at. We're going to tell them it's out there. We're going to tell them you all maintain a rating, but we're not going to ask staff to go through that process because it's not an expectation or requirement typically from a bank. That's more of a public offering requirement. From the rate side, it is understood that the credit does have an actual rating on it. So that will be factored into the offer that they put forth.
So is the decision not to pursue a rating more financial or time or size of the offering or,
All of the above. Yes.
so in general, how much would we spend to establish a rating?
From a direct dollars cost,
Yeah.
you would have a cost of around 30 or 40,000 to have that rating up front.
Yep.
There's also ongoing maintenance of that rating. You're currently maintaining a rating already, but as soon as the 2014 bonds are paid off, that actually would no longer exist because it's tied to those bonds. So you don't have to maintain that rating after those bonds are paid off. So there's a indirect cost there. And then again, it goes back to market expectation. Lenders aren't requiring a rating. It doesn't really benefit us directly on this offering to receive a rating. Like I said, that's more of a, if we were to take a public offering approach, if the size of the financing was larger, where we're preparing what's called a preliminary official statement, that's a condition where we would seek a rating.
So your advice is we don't need to pursue a rating because it's not going to make a difference in the rate or the terms and conditions of whatever institution offers the financing. Your opinion and advice is that we don't need to go through that exercise. We aren't going to find a benefit for it in reduction of rate or less money paid or other.
That's right. Being that it already exists by the commission already, that you all already maintain a rating, that is sufficient from an evidence perspective. It's not something that we require directly on this offering. The banks do know it exists. We tell them it exists. So from a cost perspective, that is a consideration they're making, but they much more heavily rely on their own internal credit due diligence and much less on a third-party report.
So last question, if the rate came back as a surprise to you, and I don't know how we would define a surprise, but if a rate came back to you as a surprise, do we still have the option to go back and get a better rating? Or because your scenario lists an A, you say we're A+.
A+.
Maybe it's material change in the rate, maybe it's not, but I just don't want to close the door of relying only on your projections, as accurate as they may be, for an A and pay extra percentage over the 20 years.
Sure. I would say, okay. It's not something that, I guess in my experience, when we go through the route of securing lending from a bank, maybe putting it this way, they've never come back to us and said, if you had a rating, you would get a better rate, or because you don't have one, this is the rate we're giving you. It's not something that's largely
I'll
driving.
move on because we're trying to push through it quickly, but I'm actually looking at it the other way, which is I don't want all our offers to come back and have it not meet your projection or be something that we can't afford. And then we're stuck. We have to take the lowest or the best proposal, but it still didn't meet your projections or expectations. And we're spending more over time because we didn't have a rating, or you're projecting a rating of A, which is less than what we are maintaining in our 2014 bonds. So it's the same answer. I just want my cake and eat it too. So continue. Sorry to sidetrack you.
No, certainly, it's a good conversation. And just to maybe add one item, the projections I do provide to date have all these assumptions included. And we do always have the option of saying, none of this was really great, right? I don't think I've ran into that before, but you're not obligated to accept any of the bids. You have the right to reject sort of in any sense. So if we do think something's off market, we can look at that, but
Okay.
not going to look to date. That's not happening. So did you have a comment? Do you want to jump in before I move on, or?
So not to belabor the point, and I feel like you've all done a good job of exploring this. Oh, excuse me. My name is Courtney Ellis. I'm a partner at Dorsey and Whitney, and I'm bond counsel to the commission. So one thing that occurs to me just in response to your question is when banks are bidding on this security, they're actually going to be looking at it in a slightly different way than if they were bidding on this through a public sale. So they will likely be viewing this as the purchase or the making of a loan for their portfolio purposes rather than the purchase of a security. And in that regard, it's helpful to the banks for their analysis of including this in their loan portfolio, for it not to have a rating, for it not to have a CUSIP number, some of these other kind of indications that they can rely on based on some Supreme Court rulings that this is a loan that they're making it rather than a security. So that's another consideration.
Always good points, Courtney. So appreciate that. So jumping back into the information, largely just to put a bow on what's included in that term sheet. We talked about the rating item, but to Courtney's point as well, we do make some provisions or determinations within the term sheet to say, this is not a security, this is more of a loan product. And as Courtney mentioned, not having a rating does point as well to the evidence that it's not a security. There's also restrictions on transfer that are sort of customary with a bank product. So there's some terms like that in there, but there's also the substantive field points of the term structure for the financing, 20 years, 15, for example, reserve requirements, and then again, what the source of repayment is. So we're putting as much information in front of them as we can in order for them to arrive at a strong and hasty credit determination so we can get an offer on a timely manner. Next slide, please. So that's what's in it. Who does it go to? Over the years, the city of Missoula has enjoyed pretty strong relationships with local lending institutions. So that's a starting point. There is the ones that are sort of in the jurisdiction of the commission. So we've got a pretty strong list of lenders that participate in this market, both regionally, locally, and nationally. So we would look to kind of receive the best offers that we can by keeping the swath or the net pretty broad. And that's what we would look to do in this solicitation. So we've got a pretty decent sized list of lenders that we would look to send this to, but all with interest and pre-qualification that they've either done this before or they have a strong interest in getting into the market. And once we receive offers, how do we evaluate them in terms of which one's the best approach to move forward with? Generally, kind of how this process plays out is we usually get a good majority of giving us exactly what we're looking for. And we usually also get a few that give us something they would prefer to give us instead of what we're asking for. We like to approach this fairly across the board. So we accept all proposals, we review all proposals, and we have a structure in terms of completeness. Are they offering what we're asking for? What are the terms and conditions along with that if they have some additions? And then what's an overall cost to the commission? So we're coupling all those items into that decision-making process, again, to arrive at something that's most suitable for this project and for the commission. Some things, of course, we kind of expect along the way is a lot of questions, and we're committed to making sure that if there are questions that come up, those are also being shared across other prospective lenders to make sure, again, that there's fairness across the solicitation process. So that's something that's important to me that we have as part of that. And when would we look to sort of put this into action? Pretty soon. You all have just received project costs for phase 2 GMP. We factor that into the estimates that we've provided on the first half of the slides that we'll go over here in a second. But we will look to have that solicitation out in the next few days, pending approval, of course. And then we like to give them about 2 weeks to review the offer, go through their internal credit approval, and then ask some questions along the way if needed. So we would look for proposals back the 29th, which puts us right in line for getting to a closing in mid-September. That's right. Yep. So in terms of that element of the presentation, that's what we would be looking to do as sort of immediate next steps, is that solicitation process again to get that lending partner on board. Questions on that?
What's the potential motion, Jody?
I'm getting it up on the screen right now, but it's just to approve the term sheet for Bank Street financing solicitation.
So go ahead, Peter, you may have.
Just quick question, Steve, thanks for being with us. Can you clarify, I assume Steve, you and Baker Tilly consultant to either the city or to the Missoula Parking Commission, is that right? What is your contractual relationship to our
Yeah, great
board
question.
here?
So I am a municipal advisor, so I'm a fiduciary to the parking commission. And to add to that, I'm not a broker dealer, I'm not a lender, so I'm not going to be involved in that aspect. What I'm going to do is look to help the commission get a lender on board. But as a fiduciary, my duty is to you all before anything else. Yep.
So again, what are we approving today?
I'm happy to make a motion.
Well, yes, you can make a motion, but go ahead, Tiffany.
I move to approve the term sheet for Bank Street financing solicitation.
And so then would you, before I rule the motion in order, would you put the term sheet up on the screen? Go ahead, yeah.
So looking at the term sheet on my computer here, there's a delta between what we just approved for GMP Phase 2 total, right? And can you just account for that difference between the 3.3 million and the 3.2 million?
Absolutely. So like any financing, there's costs to issuing the debt. So that's one item. I believe we have budgeted around 100,000 for that. We also have a reserve deposit. So depending on sort of the next item of discussion, there's an allocation for that as well. And so in addition to project cost allocations, those are probably the two other components that are creating that delta.
So we have a motion. Sorry, you need a second from either of you.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you. Motion has been seconded. In the term sheet, I realize it says draft, probably says draft up there on the screen too. In the par amount, how do we establish that par amount?
Great question. So what that is comprised of is the scenario in which we provide for a cash contribution to fund the reserve account. So that's the next item of discussion, and why it's still sort of draft is it depends on that determination. But it's the project cost deposit, so that GMP number you all just approved,
Yep.
issuance costs, and the reserve fund contribution. So if you're adding up all the numbers, project cost deposit plus a budgeted roughly 100,000 for issuance costs, and then that reserve contribution, depending on how much cash, if any, is contributed to fund that, ranges from 160 to 180,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. And that's a requirement with the existing documents that are in place. So that's how you get that total.
What are you preparing to recommend to us as a motion for that reserve account? And more accurately, Jody, what are you preparing or recommending that we not borrow using out of our cash reserves? Because there's a debt service requirement that we hold aside but there's also an opportunity, I understand, to not borrow the full amount of our GMP.
Correct. So what we are asking the board to approve today is a not to exceed of 500,000. And when Steve goes over his next part of the presentation for 9.2, we'll get into a lot of those details about a couple of different options that we reviewed. One being what is only required, which is around 200 and some $1,000, up to a max of $794,000, which is one we decided not to consider for lots of different reasons that Steve can go over. And then there's one kind of right in the middle option of putting 500,000 into the financing. So I think that's part of 9.2, and that'll be thoroughly covered in his presentation on that.
So I would suggest to the commission then that table the current motion pending that discussion as well. I mean, we probably could combine both of these motions to establish the term sheet, but also have this discussion about how much money to pay down and how much money to put in the reserve, because that part is more important to me than the term sheet. And so perhaps it was a mistake to reverse the two, but I would like to have the two discussions combined. Also cognizant, Tiffany, that you have to leave just before 1. So Steve, if you could dive in and give us your succinct summary of where we're at, and then we might get to a replacement motion that includes the dollar amount for the term sheet. Go ahead, Steve.
Certainly. I'll give the long and the short of it. So we reviewed the question that we were asked last meeting of how much can we contribute to the project with cash, if any. So we took an approach that's in alignment with rating methodologies, recognizing they've already done a ton of work to establish what matters to the credit quality of the commission. So just to lay the groundwork there. Long and the short of it, we looked at between no contribution and up to $745,000 of a contribution. That is very intentional on the 745. If we go above that, that actually puts you in the lower end of liquidity metrics for the category you're in for the methodology. So it points to that putting a fair amount of pressure on your current credit rating. So we wanted to avoid that, but that's the far end bookend that we looked at. Within that is a spectrum of what I would say is comfortability of how much can be contributed, and that's why we arrived at the 500,000 as a not to exceed, with a recommended approach of using the reserve requirement contribution as the target value that we use for the cash contribution, which again depends on how much cash you put in. The more you put in, the smaller that reserve requirement gets because you're borrowing less money. But it's somewhere around 160 to 180, 180,000 as the contribution. So that's the long and the short of it. There's a lot of metrics that feed into that determination on what that range and why we took that approach. Largely the 2 or 3 drivers that are the biggest. Liquidity is a big one. So you can imagine if you're taking cash that's available and moving it into a restricted account bucket, that's no longer usable from an operational perspective. So it removes liquidity. So that's an element we have to keep in mind. But you're also balancing that with the less you borrow, the better debt service coverage you get from an operating standpoint. So there's a give and take. But the greater sensitivities on the liquidity side, which is why I don't recommend going to the far end of the 745,000, because any little blip financially in the next coming recent years could cause you to fall down to a lower category and puts pressure on your current rating, which your current rating is a current rating you maintain. In this case, we're not getting a rating on these bonds, but if you were to ever decide to go back out for a financing that would require a rating, you want to make sure that you're keeping that in mind sort of in the long term. So that's the approach we took. I'm happy to go into more detail, but in an effort to be succinct, that's what we're looking at.
So I think how, just from a rule of order approach, is to amend the motion that's on the table with some dollar amounts that you all think are appropriate. And I would have an opinion on whatever you suggest first. Tiffany or Mike or Peter?
Joe, are you effectively asking for a motion for 9.2 that specifies the dollar amount?
Yes. And it'd be amended to the motion that we tabled 5 minutes ago, technically. But it's, yes, the discussion currently right now is to nominate that dollar amount that we're trying to fill in the piece of paper.
I'm happy to do that if appropriate.
Yeah.
Okay, recognizing Tiffany made the motion. So as an amendment
Yeah.
to that series of motions we
Yeah.
just made, I would make a motion that we approve to fund the deposit to the debt service reserve requirement in an amount not to exceed $500,000.
Okay?
Not too much, not too little, just right.
Yeah, thank you. We have a motion and a motion to amend. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mike. Jody, in your cash projections for the project, how many months would it take us to spend $500,000 on the project? What we have spent or going forward? Yep.
2 months.
You're projecting we're going to spend $500,000 either already or will spend in 2 months.
We'll spend in 2 months with our first billing coming in around like $225,000 for the month of June. And then August's projected billing for this project is right around 200,000 as well. So 500,000 will be 2 to 2.5 months.
So September-ish, and that's when you think issuance is going to happen. So we pay down $500,000 off this contract. Are we borrowing less because we've paid that out of
That's
reserves,
right.
out
Yep.
of our
It's
cash account?
It's a source of funding. So the uses of funding are more or less set, right? So it's a source of funds in lieu of bond proceeds. So you would just reduce the amount you need to borrow.
So it's going to end up
whatever.
being 2.7-ish. The par amount.
At the 500,000, I think it's right around 3 million. I think I actually have some numbers in the slides that give that scenario of the $500,000 contribution.
Similar to my rating questions, so I'll be quick. You discounted going up that 754 because it puts pressure on our existing rating and our existing debt service if something was to go sideways in the next 1 week to 10 years. That's a concern that we would have that we couldn't address right now. What if we spent all of our cash reserves on this account, on this project, and only borrowed $1.5 million?
Well, you would
And
have,
then had the flexibility, Jody, to address debt service, because we already have the ability to fund our existing debt service. It's not represented in the rating.
So
Why are we keeping on the cash? In order to, God bless the banks, but in order to just spend $1 million in interest over 20 years.
I think one reason we're keeping the cash is related to our Series 2014 bonds. We have a requirement to keep a certain level of cash, right? That's like 10% of, I can't remember the
operating
exact
reserve,
numbers.
yeah.
So we have to keep a certain percentage of our cash for our bonds, our 2014 series bonds. We also, I think our liquidity is important. We need to have some money in the bank for things that come up. For example, like this Bank Street failure. We have other aging structures, other aging infrastructure that we're working on getting maintenance plans together for, but we don't know what those maintenance plans are going to cost us. So we need some money in the bank to use for things like our aging infrastructure, our ongoing maintenance, to keep good standing with our 2014 bonds, and other projects that we're looking at, like potential expansion into the hip strip.
Okay. We've just done such a good job of raising collecting, conserving, shepherding the public's funds to the benefit of a project. Now, this is not the project that I think anybody 5 years ago would have wanted for our commission to spend on. I'm not there yet. I'm going to support whatever the commission wants to support. I'm not there yet why we wouldn't spend more cash in a relatively higher interest rate environment and borrow less. And then over time, for examples like the new scooters that I just generally know about, we still want to have enough cash in the bank to pay for more scooters out of pocket rather than having to borrow to pay for more scooters. So I trust Jody and Steve that they reviewed putting down 50% and only borrowing 50% of this project. But we have a very strong position, not necessarily reflected in our bond rating, but we have a very strong cash position and a very strong administration and lots of strong audits. My instinct is to use that strength more than is being presented in here by only putting down $500,000. End of rant. Go ahead, yes.
Well, I would kick the question back to Steve, because our trusted financial advisor that certainly understands this a heck of a lot more than I do. A lot of different factors that you're evaluating. Does Joe's sentiments cause you to waver in your recommendation?
No, it does not. You all, it is your prerogative on how to manage the commission. Certainly, I'm certainly just an advisor, but the implications of exceeding the cash contribution that we're laying out can ripple in for quite a long while. And the rating is one element that we need to keep in mind and factor, but it's not the end all be all. But what it does do is it points to the credit characteristics of the commission, and they're well-founded in their research on why they take these approaches. So I would also be a little concerned that if we spend a lot of cash on this project, that maybe banks would be disinterested in providing lending for the other half, knowing that there's not really a whole lot of liquidity from the commission side if revenues had a blip and we had to tap cash. So there's a reserve. There's some implications on using a debt service reserve from a market perspective it's a bit of a third rail that we try not to touch. So it does not change my view on a suitable approach, but it is not my prerogative to make those end decisions. So just here to help.
So yes, again, I want to give Tiffany a chance to comment before she has to go in 4 minutes. So Tiffany, anything to contribute?
No, I would say that my trust in Jody as a parking professional and Steve as our fiduciary leads me with no concerns. I think that they are recommending an amount that I'm comfortable with based on what has been discussed today and their knowledge, and I would be in favor of voting for it.
Okay. Any other comments? We have a amendment in front of us and then a main motion. So I'll call the question on the amendment first. Will you roll call vote, please, for the amendment that sets $500,000?
Okay. Peter Welker Keller, how do you vote?
Approve.
Mike Steinberg, how do you vote?
Approve.
Joe Easton, how do you vote?
Approve.
Tiffany Brander, how do you vote?
Approve?
The amendment passes, and now the main motion to present the term sheet with that dollar amount in the term sheet for solicitation. May we have a roll call vote? I'm sorry, I apologize. Any member of the public have any comments or questions about both the amendment and the motion on the table, both in the room and online?
Nobody's online?
Thank you. Yes, Peter.
There was that placeholder. I forget if it was called a TAP or a TAR or a
PAR, P-A-R.
PAR. So what is that PAR amount now?
So what you saw in the term sheet includes the contribution up to the reserve deposit, which I believe is 158,000. If we were to show the full 500,000 as a contribution, Jody, do you have that in the slide, Sandy? Otherwise, I think I can. It would be a commensurate reduction in the par amount. So about a $300 difference in what's on there versus what would be there if we showed the
Two,
full.
2928
Yeah.
plus expenses.
$2,928. That's, yep.
Any other questions or comments? Did I skip over any of our voluminous members of the public? All right, roll call vote, please.
Tiffany Brander, how do you vote?
Approve?
Joe Easton, how do you vote?
Approve.
Peter Walker Keller, how do you vote?
Approve.
And Mike Steinberg, how do you vote?
Approve.
Okay, thanks for indulging my
Anytime.
questions.
Appreciate it.
That's the end of our action items. Do we have any non-action items, any new business or old business? Jody? Next meeting is August 12th. What is that looking like?
So we will have approval of our financing that we get through this solicitation. So Steve will be back and Courtney will be back, and we'll have a recommendation for the board to approve a financing package. And we will also have hip strip expansion map for you all to approve to be taken to council.
Any concerns about August 12th from the commission?
I will be unavailable. Definitely not in town, but I will see about the possibility of phoning in.
Okay.
All good for me as well.
Okay, thanks, Tiffany. No other business in front of the commission. I'll adjourn the meeting. It is 12:58.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.